Have you ever heard of the Zeigarnik Effect? It's a pretty popular theme on YouTube, and if you look it up on Google, you won't be short on hits. There's so many articles on it, so many blog posts on it, and it's the idea that for interrupted tasks, we tend to have better memory than compared to completed tasks. But I bet you didn't know this. A large review came out this year and showed it was utter bullshit. One of Zeigarnik's colleagues and fellow PhD researchers at the time doing her doctoral studies, Ovsiankina, she also found an effect on motivation, and that effect is robust. So let's get into it. And this is the article here that I wanted to share with you and to unpack the research within this article. It's entitled Interruption, Recall and Resumption, a meta-analysis of the Zeigarnik and Ovsiankina effects, and it's by Ghibellini and Meier, and it was released earlier in 2025 this year. So let's get stuck into it. Now the article begins with a bit of a lay of the land about what each of the two effects are and where they originated. So the Zeigarnik effect and the Ovsiankina effects and how they came together as parallel theories, one on memory, one on motivation to complete tasks. Both involving the interruption of tasks, right? The interruption of tasks and its effect on memory is the Zeigarnik effect, and the interruption of tasks and its effect on motivation to complete the task is the Ovsiankina effect. So let me give you a definition according to the paper. According to the authors, the Zeigarnik effect investigated the influence of interrupted intentions on subsequent memory. She presented participants with numerous tasks, of which some were interrupted, and reported that afterward, participants recalled more interrupted than finished tasks, end of quote. This is the so-called Zeigarnik effect. Now the authors go on to define the Ovsiankina effect, which was discovered in 1928, whereas the Zeigarnik effect was discovered in 1927, because those two authors, the two researchers, were operating under Kurt Lewin, and they were both doctoral students at the same time. So they've got a similar finding, a similar body of research and similar influences along those methodological lines. So let me just read from the article how they define the Ovsiankina effect. According to the authors, using a similar approach, Ovsiankina reported that participants tended to resume the interrupted tasks unprovoked when given the opportunity, which is the so-called Ovsiankina effect. Now the reason I'm quite interested in this is because I think there's a huge misunderstanding out there amongst the general public about what the Zeigarnik effect actually is and its implications for learning and memory. However, let's back up a little bit. The Zeigarnik effect has nothing to do with motivation. It's got everything to do with memory. So it's all about memory. That's the Zeigarnik effect. So already we're addressing some of the misconceptions out there that it's a motivational effect. It's not a motivational effect. It's a memory effect. Well, that's what it's claimed to be. It's the Ovsiankina effect that's got to do with motivation. Have you ever walked past a puzzle and seen the puzzle with a few missing pieces, that incomplete puzzle, and you just get this sensation, this overwhelming sensation and motivation to go up there and fill the missing pieces, particularly as it gets close to the completion of that puzzle? If you felt that, that's the Ovsiankina effect at work in you. It's to complete the unfinished task. That's a motivational framework, right? So you can see how one's a memory claim, one's a motivational claim. However, they often cross over and people mistake the two. The lesser known claim, but the more rigorous claim that I'll put to you with evidence in just a moment, is the Ovsiankina effect. So the authors conducted two separate meta-analyses, one for the Zeigarnik effect, one for the Ovsiankina effect. And I'll just talk to you a little bit about the methodology they used. So they looked through a whole heap of the common databases where all of the journals that look at these psychological effects exist, and they yielded 1,349 articles after they took away the double-ups. So a fairly big yield. They went through the papers and they divided them into the Ovsiankina effects and the Zeigarnik effects, and then they measured the impact of those across the whole distribution of effects across all of the involved studies that targeted one effect or the other, the Ovsiankina effect or the Zeigarnik effect. Now the authors went to quite a bit of trouble to outline how they measured the Zeigarnik effect, because it's measured in different ways in different studies, and if you're going to pile them all into the same analysis, you've got to make sure there's an apples and apples comparison going on and not an apples and oranges comparison where you're comparing like for non-like effects, right? So one of the ways they did that, there's a constellation of measures that they use. One is the mean ratio between the interrupted tasks and the completed tasks and the scores they got on those in terms of the accuracy of recall, right? So there's different ways to measure this, but essentially it's a ratio of evidence in favor of the Zeigarnik effect versus evidence against the Zeigarnik effect, right? So anything greater than 1 is a positive impact in favor of the Zeigarnik effect. It means that you're remembering more for the interrupted tasks compared to the items that were recalled for the uninterrupted or completed tasks that you could recall in one single attempt at recall. Now let's switch to the Ovsiankina effect. How did the authors measure that? Well, they also used a ratio. They called it the resumption rate, which is basically the percentage of individuals who resumed the task after the interruption, right? And then they compared that as a ratio or proportion over the denominator of the people who completed the task without interruption. So you're comparing those who the person when they had their task interrupted and the completion rate for that versus when they didn't have the task interrupted and the completion rate for that. So it's a ratio of interrupted versus uninterrupted completion rates. The author said it like this: including the value calculated in Zeigarnik's 1927 original publication, a weighted ratio of the mean interrupted rate over the mean completed rate was 0.99. Remember that 1.0 is a zero effect. Anything less than that is a negative impact from the Zeigarnik effect. Anything more than that is a positive effect. So it's actually slightly negative, but close to 1.0. So we'll say this and follow the author's lead here, suggesting that interrupted tasks are recalled about the same as finished tasks. So no effect for the Zeigarnik effect. And the author said this, I quote, "These results further underscore that the values from Zeigarnik's 1927 original computations are inflated." Now I'll just show you on the screen, everything to the right of that dotted line is in favor of the Zeigarnik effect. Anything to the left favors the completed tasks, as in the evidence is against the Zeigarnik effect. So you can see the vast majority of the distribution is around zero, and it zigzags across the zero line. So not too much to write home about. I wouldn't be bragging about it or advising people to take up disrupting tasks to help with their memory. Now let's have a look at the Ovsiankina effect because it's much more robust. So the authors found the resumption rate. Remember, that's the proportion of interrupted tasks a person is likely to finish, and 50% would be break even with uninterrupted tasks. So you're more likely to, if it's over 50%, you're more likely to follow through with an incomplete or interrupted task than you would for a uninterrupted task, right? So anything over 50% is in favor of the Ovsiankina effect. So the authors found a weighted resumption rate of 67%, so well above the 50% chance line, which will be a zero effect. When they took out Ovsiankina's original work, just like they tried with the Zeigarnik effect, take out the original author, often you see the findings collapse because of original author bias or novelty bias. Now they took the original author's findings out and the findings were robust to that. So leave one out analysis is what we call it. And the 67% remained 66.79%. So it dropped tiny a little bit, but mostly robust. So that's by and large quite a large effect. The Ovsiankina effect is quite a robust effect. And we see it on screen. Most of the findings are to the right of the chance line, which is at 50%. And that means it's in favor of the Ovsiankina effect. And the authors reported this in their discussion. Our analysis of the Zeigarnik effect is quite sobering. The current findings do not support a memory advantage for interrupted tasks when situational influences and individual differences are not accounted for. No Zeigarnik effect could be observed in situations that we labelled neutral conditions. End of quote. Now the authors also report this. The Ovsiankina effect, on the other hand, appears to be a more general tendency. A tendency to resume interrupted tasks can be observed reliably. End of quote. I'll read you a couple more quotes in the author's concluding statements. They said this: "Herein lies the problem. Task involvement has become more difficult as we are increasingly faced with interruptions. Mobile phone notifications, emails at work, and a tendency for multitasking all impede our ability to focus on a task, and yes, they do impede memory. Multitasking is a myth. It impedes memory, grossly impedes our learning, and so we don't want to multitask to improve our memory. The Zeigarnik effect is a non-effect. It's a spurious effect. So don't go try and interrupt your focus and your attention just to improve your memory." Now the authors round out this wonderful paper with this conclusion. In conclusion, our meta-analysis indicates that the Ovsiankina effect may represent a general tendency. In contrast, the replicability of the Zeigarnik effect remains questionable, and the supposed memory advantage for finished compared to interrupted tasks is certainly not universal. End of quote. So there you go. Don't go around trying to interrupt your tasks to improve your memory. It's a backwards way of thinking. We know that focused, uninterrupted time is the most important way to concentrate on your learning and improve your learning. So get rid of the distractions, get rid of the multitasking, and stop interrupting your learning. And of course, if you want to improve your memory, having little bits, often chewing away and having one little bite at a time of those big tasks. You know, how do you eat an elephant? One little bite at a time. Well, you do that with your studies as well. A little bit at a time, and there's an internal drive towards completion once you start. So the motivational effects of the Ovsiankina effect are real. So begin your task to motivate yourself towards the next step. Take the first step, the second step will be easier, the third step easier, and so on and so forth. All right, so the Ovsiankina effect is a real effect. Use it to your advantage to overcome procrastination and to build momentum in your learning.